Good afternoon. This is Mike Layton again. I'm the owner of Stochastic Marketing, and for any first-time listeners out there, Stochastic works with hundreds of HVAC and plumbing contractors who collectively have sold, it's almost $4 billion in sales now, and we've analyzed about 30-plus million of their customer visits to develop our data analytics and the Mirror Score reports. And for those of you who've listened to this for the first time, we make these podcasts available to our customers just as a way to kind of collect and share some real-world data and solutions and kind of introduce some answers to the challenges all of our contracting customers face every day. But behind all those numbers are people and their experience. And today I'd like to talk with Rick Hutcherson. He's the owner of RHI Training and Wagner Mechanical. And I'd just like to talk with Rick about his experience and kind of learn what we can from him. Good afternoon, Rick.
Mike, how are you doing?
Not too bad on this rainy day. I wish it was a little warmer here in St. Louis. For July, it's only about 80 degrees, so we got time to figure out how to sell something. Hey, Rick, we worked with some mutual clients around the country for a few years now, haven't we? 4 or 5?
We have 4 or 5 minimally. It's actually probably higher than that, Mike. Successfully worked with companies with your mastermind marketing and the sales training that provide to back it up. It has just been a great ride.
Yeah, and for those listeners who don't know either of us, Rick and I are just a couple of guys who grew up in a part of St. Louis that many of you may have heard of called Ferguson. What locals here in St. Louis call us North County Hoosiers. Yeah, the HVAC industry has a number of guys from around the country who sort of grew up in that same neighborhood, but we never met each other until we both fortunately moved out of there and experienced what some people might call some success in around the HVAC industry. There are a bunch of guys from that part of the world, aren't there, Rick, that are finding some success in this industry?
Oh, Mike, it's unbelievable, actually. Yeah, who's come out of St. Louis, and I moved away to Florida 20 years ago, and just about a couple of years ago did Mike and I find each other, and we were next door neighbors almost, in the same town. And they say like finds like, and I thought probably one of the greatest marketing strategies, not to try to toot your horn there, Mike, but never seen anything like it. And mixed with my training, it made total sense, and we built this bond, and just everything's gone up from there, and are just glad that we found each other.
Wait, and it was really like the old joke about even a blind hog finds a nut. We started working with you in Albuquerque, New Mexico, with your company Wagner, just before you doubled your sales there, right?
That's correct. Yes.
And
Mike,
so,
we went from that company with just a great staff. I can't say enough about the staff. The general manager Scott, Daniel, Gary, the operations manager, partner Ronnie. You just can't say enough about the team. But I'll tell you, when your marketing came into place, along with just good quality training of the technicians and quality training with the salespeople. We went from a very broken company that was a blue dot company, right around $900,000 a year or so, and on track for between $12 and $13 million, not too many years away from the purchase. So it's been a combination of Stochastic and just a great staff and sales training. It's without acquisition, actually, just pure raw growth.
Just organic growth, right?
Yes, it is.
Now most guys would know you as a long-time sales trainer for decades, right? How'd you get into this industry? You first started with Abrams, didn't you?
Yeah, well, I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I was kind of not a bad guy, but a train wreck in my teenage years, and really didn't know where I was going to go or why I was even going. and I just did, the three things. I was going to either be a rock star or a professional athlete or a heating cooling guy. And and heating cooling guy just seemed to be the most sexy choice. So I went to school for a couple years and took air conditioning heating, and actually enjoyed it. And did a couple things I didn't like. I got into pipe fitting and did some commercial duct work, and of course the great economy crash of the early '80s hit, the recession, the Cold War, and everybody was going out of business. And I seen an ad in the newspaper, and it was Jim Abrams, and I went and applied, hired me. And I guess I was one of the first, real selling techs in the country back then in the early '80s. And I was able to produce about $500,000 back in the early '80s as a salesperson out of a truck.
So how long did you do that? I mean, different size contractors kind of seem to take a different approach to sales training, and a lot of them, the owner tries to manage all the marketing, all the advertising, and he tries to train and he tries to coach the team on sales. And then some other guys come at it and they're big enough to have an in-house marketing manager. And then there's some other guys that are somewhere in the middle, and they bring into someone, like yourself from the outside, kind of in an ongoing relationship, right?
Yeah.
In the early '80s, that wasn't really going on back then, was it? I mean,
oh no, it was raw. Yeah, it was really raw. In fact, all the companies that before that, or if you applied, the general manager or the owner of the company, wore a service uniform. He had the plastic Sporlan pouch in his pocket with 3 thermometers and several pins stuck in it, and the blue ink stain still in the corner of his pocket. How that happened, not sure, but maybe the towel thrown over the shoulder. And Jim Abrams was kind of just something new and fresh, never even seen before in America, probably. And even with his wisdom and knowledge, there was nothing like that back then. It was just raw phone calls. We had a 32-person telemarketing room that I eventually started running, training, and I'd run service calls and sales calls during the day, and then run the telemarketing room at night, and that's where we got our leads from.
Well, I mean, a lot has changed. I mean, you spent a lot of time traveling to contractors from your base in kind of on the beach house in Florida. How many days a year do you think you spend on the road out of different contractors everywhere?
Well, this was a crazy year, Mike. I said I would never do this, but it was crazy and fun. I'm not sure that I'd repeat this year, but I would say that 3 weeks a month I was on the road this year so far.
Man, so I mean, you're typically there on site Monday morning through Friday afternoon, aren't you?
That's correct. Yeah,
okay.
All the way through. It's every part of the company, with the dispatchers, the CSRs, the general managers, the service managers, the operations, install, to absolutely the sales and technician lead setting or technician sales, depending on the culture of the company.
Now we, of course, we see it all from the numbers side. We see guys' numbers, and then we say, something's out of whack here. We're not always on site. You are. What's the most common sales challenge that you see when you're going into an HVAC or plumbing guy? What's the most common sales challenge? Is it people? Is it training? Is it a mix of both? What's the thing that most often has to be fixed?
Well, Mike, we have to blame it on people. And I mean, it doesn't matter if I go from Alaska, which I have had many great companies in Alaska, to the tip of Florida, to the tip of California, to the top of the country on the East Coast. It's always people is always their biggest complaint. Can't find the right people. But the real challenge, I believe, yes, people is always a struggle. It's never going to go away. But what I see more than anything else is just not enough training of the people they already have. They really don't have a system. They don't have a program, a process in place to create great, top-notch people. They, one, don't have their spiff and bonus processes in place. They don't have the training in place. They don't have the meetings in place. There's just a lot of stuff missing to make a champion technician, and it's really is because of the culture of the company. I walk into a company, Mike, and I can look at the size of the training room and see their first problem. Their training room should be the biggest room in the whole company because that's where the golden magic is made, and you just don't see that in companies. Some companies, they still have meetings out in the shop. Everybody's out there sweating, sitting in dirt on top of boxes. And so guess what? Make training a minor, and your success will be a minor. Make training a major, and your success will be a major.
Well, so many guys in this business are technicians at heart. Now, they don't survive unless they can sell, at least at a basic level, right? But the owner being a technician at heart and selling is different than a guy that just wants to run around and fix stuff, right?
Right.
How do you bridge that gap between a small business owner who thinks they understand sales and what you see in the guys with the big state-of-the-art training rooms and people that have a daily meeting and then a weekly intense meeting with role-playing? How do you have the two completely different ends of the spectrum?
Well, Mike, I think I got a real clear answer for that is because I don't teach selling. That might sound really weird, but no one wants to be sold. And, I'm asking a blue-collar guy to be a white-collar guy. It's going to be both. The blue-collar guy that fixes the stuff, he's going to be the white-collar guy who becomes a great communicator to the customer. So I try to take selling out of it because I think that, none of the techs really want to sell. I mean, you got a couple of guys out there that, they're strong salespeople and that's in their nature. But let's talk about the 90% of the techs out there. They really don't want to feel like they have to sell somebody or they have to sell somebody into something. And so I teach non-selling sales. I believe that when I approach a company and I teach them that we're not selling anymore. In fact, one of the first things I say is stop selling now. I want you to quit. Stop selling. Quit. They look at me with these giant eyes like, are you nuts? Especially the owner, when he never hears it for the first time, he thinks, I just hired you to do this. And what I teach him is that I want you to become the most thorough, the most impeccable technician that's ever been in their house, to go through every single thing you can go through in their house. And what I want you to do is to teach them how you can improve the quality of their life as far as comfort, safety, health, energy savings, maybe not wasting money keeping the old system in the house. You teach them so well that they feel stupid saying no to you. Don't sell. Become a master teacher. And because I do that in my process of what I teach through a week's time, that these guys get it, and I take guys that before hated selling now realize they're not selling. They're just genuinely helping people make a better decision.
And is that the trick? Because a lot of times everybody tells me they have a hard time finding techs. I mean, all the time. Everybody says that. So if they have a tech that all he wants to do is fix stuff and he never, quote, sells, do they have to face the decision of, do I get rid of this guy and hopefully find a new guy who will sell? Or can you fix them? Can you teach them how to sell by teaching them non-selling techniques?
Well, Mike, I tell you, two guys that come to mind in my life that have been huge influences besides Jim Abrams was a guy in Charlotte, North Carolina, Dewey Jenkins, and a dear friend and just brilliant Paul Kelly, Parker and Sons, who just grow these monster businesses and just with great success. They basically, we all had the same belief, but, they just reassured me that you have to understand that there is a time when some people just are not going to work in that position. You have to just understand that it costs more to keep them than it does to just let them go, even if you're in trouble and need more people. The cost of having somebody run calls and producing numbers that you're losing money on, what does that do for you? You're better off not running the call. So I guess the answer to that question is that, yeah, either there is a time that you have to look at your people. Those guys both taught me that every couple months you got to reevaluate your team and say, all right, this team took me to $4 million. Can this team take me to $5 million? Who can be trained? Who's open for training? And who needs to be replaced? Does that make sense, Mike?
Oh yeah. So I mean, basically, it's a 2-week cycle, or 2 months. But I will say one thing. I mean, in our background, we have supported the sales teams of big insurance companies, mutual fund companies, Fortune 500 drug companies, or whatever. I think the residential HVAC and plumbing contractors spend more in time and money on sales training than any other industry I've ever had any real exposure to. I mean, from our perspective as a marketing guy, really all our customers are sales teams, really, right?
Right.
Right. And now, think back to when you started with Jim Abrams. I mean, 25, 35 years ago. It took you a few decades, and guys like, Dewey Jenkins and Paul Kelly and others, do you think it took them that long? When did everybody else start to kind of understand that? I'm not sure everybody does, but when did that start taking hold, that view of sales?
Well, I'll tell you that, like I said, being blessed is to be around those guys and be in their life and just, learn from them and watch what they do. I'll tell you, I think we all come to our own at different times, but I think that, I'm not sure there's a real answer to that, Mike. It took time. I mean, it took time, but the key was with each one of those guys, they looked at what they didn't want to be and didn't want to do and just did what they had to do to get where they wanted to go. So that sounds a little confusing, but what they did was they didn't sit there and accept what was. They did whatever it took to get where they wanted to go. And so they would take from anybody that had something better than they knew or had, learn from it, and go for it. And they were constantly working on how can I change for the better. One of the greatest things I've learned and I teach in my training is I draw a circle on the board. I put the comfort zone. It's a circle. And I draw the body in the middle and I say, this is you. This is your comfort zone. And when you stay inside that zone, you're always going to have what you already have. You can't go past it because that means you're repeating everything you've always done. And until you push yourself out that comfort zone, things that make you uncomfortable, you can't butt through and go to the next level in your life. And so what I see in these Paul Kellys, these Jim Abrams, these Dewey Jenkins, ASI Hastings, they don't stay comfortable. They're just constantly figuring out how to go to the next level. They bust out of their zone constantly. And when you get to that point of not staying comfortable and pushing yourself to the next level, I think the timing is, it could be for anybody now. You have to choose it. Some people take something for it to happen. Maybe, really in trouble getting ready to lose their company is what does it. are just being sick and tired of being sick and tired, or a trainer comes in like myself and says, holy crap, and the guy wakes up. Or maybe it's Mike with his marketing comes in and says, I can show you how to make an extra $2 million if you change this. So I think there's not one answer to that. It's all those answers.
Well, I know that I'm always struck by the lack of knowledge. Let me ask you, do you think most contractors know what a new customer should be worth? Do you think they actually have a number?
I think they have no clue. I don't even know if most contractors know what they should be making an hour per technician, or what break even is on the average ticket, or what break even on the month of sales before they start making money is. That's the sad part of it, Mike.
Well, I know when we first started working at Wagner, I frankly thought something was wrong with your numbers. I thought things were broken. The typical, $1 million contractor, of which there are tens of thousands, right?
Right.
Their average new customer, and I would define new as they're new in that first year of that relationship, right? You got into the house once, maybe you couldn't replace it, it wasn't dead, but now you got to get back in there the second time. So typically that customer, we see that number being worth, say, $1,400. Now, I've seen your results in contractors with an average new customer value of $2,500.
Correct.
$3,500.
Yes.
$35. I've even seen you pop one with $5,000. But the equipment's more or less the same.
Mike,
so
here.
Yeah.
This is the
what's
key.
The difference?
Okay. No, but this is the key that I want everybody who's listening to this to understand. That's with impeccable integrity. We have the greatest guarantees of anybody in the industry, or for sure in our town, that we will do whatever it takes to make somebody happy, or they're going to get their money back. So we do the right thing always. So don't let anybody who's listening to this think because we do that kind of volume that we lie or cheat or deceive or take advantage of customers to get that. It's just doing calls the right way. It's being the most thorough guy out there. It's making options and giving options that nobody else gives. You can't get a yes without a no. And so if I'm going to find a bad water heater, I'm always going to offer a tankless. Why not? The worst thing they can say to me is no. So I'll get more yeses on tankless than anybody in Albuquerque, and I'll get more no's than anybody in Albuquerque. But I can't get a yes without a no opportunity.
Yeah, I think, guys make that comment that they don't want to be the highest priced guy in town, or they say, I don't want to be the lowest priced guy in town. But what we see is it seems like it's a closing percentage. It doesn't seem like, for instance, the difference between a guy who's average is a key word, new customer value is $1,400, and the guy who's average is $2,800, which is a good number. It's not that he's charging twice as much. It's that he's successfully selling almost the same thing twice as often, right? He's building value, and the numbers are dramatically different. Now, how do you reach a consensus on sales training implementation between, say, the owner and his sales manager or the sales team, right? To some of the salespeople go, I've been here for 10 years. I'm sitting out here. I'm just going through the drill here. Hopefully I'll pick up a little tricks, but then I'll go back to my old technique.
Well,
how many guys have you trained? How many guys have you sat down with over the years? Hundreds?
Oh, come on, Mike. Thousands. Are you kidding me? So yeah, thousands. So here's the thing, right? In St. Louis, not too long ago, I had a bunch of guys that came in that weren't from the industry. They came from AT&T, cable sales, and I got 1 week with them. It was kind of an emergency situation. Awesome. Just enjoyed the crap out of it. And the next month, this is a well-established, solid company. The next month had one of the largest residential sales dollars they ever had in the history of their company with a bunch of green guys. Now, the thing is that, we have a process of being different, and that's what I create. Separate yourself from everybody else so they can't compare you to anybody else. They can't price shop you because there's nothing to shop against. You're so unique and different, they can't find anybody that does what you do. 20% of the people, Mike, I said to you earlier, will buy from anybody. You show up. I don't care about those people. 30% cheap, don't care what you have to say. So I write them off. At least 50% will go either way, and that's where I get the guys who are in the 55% and 60% closing ratio, get 25 or 30% of them. And we have to separate ourselves to be different than anybody else in that moment, in that house, to gain that number, that 20 or 30% out of that 50. Did I answer your question, Mike?
Yeah. And one answer triggers another question. So, there's a couple ways more than a couple ways you can train an employee. You hire an individual new guy. Let's say you're small. You send them off to sales training school for a week, right? They get introduced to simple stuff on furnaces and air conditioners or water heaters or whatever it might be. And you send them off, you hope they get it, and they kind of come back on their own, and the owners kind of hope they get it. Then, and that's one option. Sometimes that's all that's available. Then another option is they bring somebody in like yourself in sort of a classroom-style training, and he comes in, everybody jumps in their vans, goes out and sells something. And then there's, you got a mix of the classroom and a ride-along, and then at the other extreme where we're going to do the classroom, the ride-along, and you're going to actually elbow somebody aside and help them close a deal, show them how it's done, right?
Right.
What are the strengths and weaknesses? Not everybody's available. That doesn't work for. Not every option's available to everybody. One-man shop, two-man shop, three-man shop. He may not be able to bring in a top-of-the-line guy, but what's the strengths and weaknesses? Where do you start?
Well, Mike, that's a great question. There's a lot of things that you can do. The challenge is that, unfortunately for me, because I care about everybody I train, I take it very personal, and I want people to walk away successful. If I have, 150 guys in a room, I know I can't change all of them. I know that, but I want to, and when I don't, it hurts. It really does. I take it very personal. Doesn't hurt my feelings. I only have one left, so I have to protect it. So, but the whole thing is, though, is that I want them to succeed. And the unfortunate thing is that there's nothing more powerful than in-house training, getting the whole company to think the same way, and showing them how it's done and doing it in front of them. And that's one thing that's, I think created my success through the years, is that just like that company I was talking about in St. Louis, I took these guys out all week long, and I sold, almost every job we went on. I think it was like an 80% or higher closing ratio on every call. And but that being said, we know we can't do that everywhere. So what needs to happen is I need to train trainers if you want to be successful. We have to train trainers, owners, managers, how to train and duplicate what I teach. If I'm not there, that they can do it and keep and uphold it.
Okay, so, it's a Malaysian principle. So if you come in, if a sales team gets sales training, they ought to see an improvement in sales really right away, right?
Immediately.
Now,
First week.
Right. What percent of contractors, the sales trainer has left the building, right? What percent do you think over these years just slip back into the old habits within a few months?
I'll tell you, Mike, that's also there's two answers to that. The ones that have a sales manager, let's say this, the one who has the right, not just the sales manager, the right sales manager and the right service manager. See, the problem with service managers is that most people hire a service manager who's technical, maybe didn't like people, he's really good technical, but he's terrible with people, and they're the ones that are running the service department, teaching them nothing on human skills. Big problem there. So if you have the right service technician, or service manager rather, that is great with people, a good sales manager who is, buys into the program, it won't slip. They need to, they do need to hear it again every 6 months or so, every 3 months or so. But if they don't have a team in place or an owner or a manager that will support what they learned, it goes away in several months, Mike.
Well, we're kind of caught in the middle sometimes because we hear a lot of contractors, not all of them, say that all the time they just need more leads from their marketing, right? Give me better leads, give me more leads. And, often when we dig into the numbers, we go, you're getting an average of $400, $600, $1,000 less than the average, right? So it's not, if we give you more leads, you just would be more below average. And when we point that out to people and say, you got to call somebody. We're not a sales trainer. Stochastic can put you in front of the right homes, but we can't close the deal for you. Why do you think most contractors don't commit themselves to having a better sales team, even when their numbers scream, fix this right now, right? We'll have the same conversation every 90 days, and then it's almost like they have to wait a full year, but they go, okay, you're right. I am leaving money on the table. I'm not making as much money as I could from the same amount of work, right? I could for the same people, same number of homes, I could make a hell of a lot more money if I just slowed down and sold better.
Well, Mike, I got so many answers here. So, back in the beginning days, so I was kind of like, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I believe I was one of the first pioneer. I was in the list anyway. Trainers going into companies and training, and they'd call me up and say how much you want, and they'd have a heart attack, and I'd say really, and they'd say, well, what if you train this guy and they leave, or how much you charge for training, and I would tell them, look, first of all, there is no cost to training, good training. Cost is when you pay for something and doesn't give you anything back. And my whole goal was to teach them it costs you not to train. I said, look, if you got five techs and they run 5 calls a day, right? And they run those 5 calls a day. It's 25 a day, right? So that's 125 a week. And if they're not trained to properly address each call, and they come in with average tickets of $100, what does that cost you? So
yeah, I mean, we know. I don't want to interrupt, but we know that the average contractor, this might shock some of the people, the average for the number of people, to your point, that you lose money on is 53% of the homes you get into will spend less than $500 with you. 53%, right?
Absolutely. Mike, I used to have a couple phrases I used to say, and this might sound a little arrogant, but I used to ask them how long you've been in business, and they say 15 years. And I said, so you think that I'm asking for a lot of money? And they go, yeah. And I go, well, if you can't afford me now, that means you need me now.
Yeah, right, right.
If you've been doing this for 15 years, you can't afford it, you need to afford it, right? So the key is that, Mike, so let's go off that for a second. That, the technicians not being trained properly, what that cost is just so huge, Mike. I mean, you just said it, 53%. In 1 week's time, the right trainer inside of a company will pay for himself in a week, just on the technicians. But let's go past the technicians. You get them. Your marketing gets the customer, the client, to call the office. Who do they have answering the phones? Aunt Betty that really hates her job and really doesn't give a crap. Who's answering the phones? I mean, is this person trained, physically trained for the marketing piece that you put out? Are they trained to a customer that's really kind of interested? If they didn't call, they weren't interested. What's the conversion rate of a customer that's saying, yeah, well, tell me about this, and the CSR or the dispatcher, whoever's answered the phone, really doesn't know how to answer their questions, really doesn't know how to guide them into a set appointment, or doesn't care, which is in some cases a lot of warm bodies in chairs because they just need somebody to sit there and answer phones, not the right person, not trained properly. What is that costing you? Just the person answering the phone. Then you go through that process of loss. Then you go to the technicians that aren't trained. You go through that process of loss. They set a lead for a salesman that's not trained properly. You go through that process of loss. And, of course, marketing will never work. Marketing will suck. And they'll say, your marketing doesn't work because their process doesn't work.
You're kind of depressing. But you're right. You're depressing me, but this is a topic you feel passionately about, and we could talk about this literally for hours and hours. Just the subject you just talked about, booking, and all the numbers we've got on that. I guess for our listeners, I think I appreciate your time taking out of your travel since you're having a little downtime down there in Florida. Why don't we dig into some of these details again in the near future? Because we could talk all day about how money leaks out of that CSR booking, because I would argue if people call, they're not calling just to ask how you're doing. You ought to book every one, right?
Yes.
And then, okay, now I went out, the tech got out to the house. I mean, the reality from the numbers we see, no more than 60% of the callers are actually booked. And that's a whole nother topic of conversation about why, right? Why you can't sell your way into the home. Create some value, give me some time in your schedule, create some value. And like you said, the marketing doesn't suck when I'm getting into 60, 70, 80% of the homes. And when I'm closing, flipping the right amount, closing the right percentage of the deal, the marketing works great when that happens. And it won't work without it, right?
Right.
Why don't we just wrap this one up? And
sounds great, Mike.